Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. My name is Nikhil Patel. I'm the engineering manager on data migration team in data platform organization. This evening, I'm joined by my colleague, Pavel Krunechka, and Jeff Dalgas, who works for Stack Overflow. First and foremost, thank you all for making it this evening. I hope you all are having a great time at the build. It's certainly been a big day, especially for data, with the announcements around Cosmos DB. I hope you guys have taken that in. It's amazing. And support for Postgres and MySQL on Azure platform. I'm hoping that makes it that much more interesting for everyone to come use Azure as a platform of choice. Let's go through what we are going to cover in this session. We'll touch upon applications journey to cloud, the cloud migration lifecycle, so to speak. Talk about the database migration lifecycle associated when you move your application to cloud. And we'll share the tools and learnings that we've been getting from our customers all along to make the journey hopefully that much more easier and manageable for all you guys. We'll talk about what you can do with the apps once you've migrated to cloud and adopted the cloud database platform. We'll do a hands-on demo of moving an on-prem enterprise app from Stack Overflow, guys, that runs on SQL Server to SQL DB. And we'll open the floor for Q&A. So that's the plan. Let's jump in. Cloud's becoming ubiquitous. With that, the need for migrating apps. As a developer, it becomes an essential part of our job to make this journey happen. And in order to do that, it's our mission, so to speak, to make this successful for our businesses in this new environment. Let's talk about the phases in which this journey takes place. The first phase is the cloud assessment phase. Now, for people in this room who are decision makers, the managers, people who bet your enterprise app strategy on cloud, you want to know all about the total cost of ownership, return of investment. You want to know all about the security and compliance given by the cloud that makes your enterprise strategy valid in cloud. Now, for the developers in this room, I'm sure the first thing that comes is, hey, what tools and processes are there for me to avail to make this migration happen? What you want to do is get a candidate ready that fits the bill from TCO and ROI perspective, security compliance, and the tools, and then jump into the POC, proof of concept phase. Start small, build confidence with the cloud, which will help you in estimating the effort. You start with a smaller app, you deploy it, figure it out, all the blockers, and then make a strategy for your tens of apps or your app estate. Once you are confident moving a smaller app, you're going to have to worry about data migration. Now, this is the focus of our topic tonight. I'll jump into this much deeper. Let's finish the phases. Once the data migration is done, you have the actual app to move. In this phase, you're thinking about the application compatibility. Is the design pattern that you've established for your app that runs on-prem, is it valid anymore in cloud? What are the security aspects, the authentication and authorizations that your app needs? How do you do that in cloud? And finally, the most important question on everyone's mind with the apps is the DevOps. What is your code agility? How do you deploy? How do you manage? Certainly, the world in cloud is different when it comes to your apps running in your data center. You have an ops team, right? Perhaps, right? In cloud, it becomes that much more difficult or different to have an ops team because cloud gives you all those abilities to do it. How do you monitor? How do you manage logs, for example? Finally, once you've gone through all these phases, the best part is the optimization, the reason why you embarked on this journey. Cloud gives you the auto-scaling, the elasticity, and high availability that you would have to spend a lot of time and effort to get if you're running this on-prem. Once you have these phases, let's jump back into the data migration, which is the focus of this evening's talk. Data migration phases. Our customers have told us that they do this data migration in phases. We've sat with them, we've learned from them. The first phase is the assessment phase. In this phase, you're assessing the platform readiness, right? Is the cloud platform, the cloud database platform that you're taking, is it ready to onboard your database or your data assets? What are the migration blockers, for example? What are the feature gaps that are available that you have to overcome in order to make this journey happen? And then you want to assess the platform for scale and perf. You'd be surprised many times your database may not perform as well as you would think once you've migrated to a cloud platform. You'd have to think about the capacity. There is elasticity and high availability, but there is an opposite end to that where if you don't plan it correctly, it can end up costing you a lot. Once you've done the assessment phase, it's time to migrate data. In this, you're performing the schema migration and the data migration. Once you have that, you have to migrate your server objects, things like certificates, encryption keys, logins, any code packages that are needed for your app to run along with the database. Once all that is done, there's always post-migration fixes, things that you need to tune up to make your app work, to make your database work at par or at better than what it was when it was on-prem. Let's talk about friction. The reason we are all here is because we know that cloud migration is not an easy process. We know that. We acknowledge that there are frictions that makes this process a dreadful one for enterprises. There are enterprises who do not want to move, even though there are advantages of adopting cloud. We know in developer community that there are plenty of frictions that causes developers to dread this process when their enterprise embarks on this journey. So what are they? The first and foremost is planning. Planning is tedious. Now, I'm not talking about planning for 1 or 5 or 10 database movements. When you have 100, 400, or 1,000 instances that you want to move, how do you make the planning for such a move happen? You have to think about the application re-engineering that might be needed, database and application tuning that might be needed. You have to have deeper insights when you are thinking about betting your farm on this. What are those deeper insights? For example, compatibility issues. Is your database compatible with the newer platform? You would be surprised that the features that run just perfectly fine in database on-prem may or may not work as they're supposed to when you move to cloud. Your app might be using a feature that's not available in new platform. And your feature regressions are a common thing if not planned for correctly. All of this makes it so much harder when you have a very varied data asset deployed in your enterprise. And thirdly, the lack of comprehensive tools. We all know people use tens of scripts. Now, the fun with scripts is you can write to make script work for few databases, but once you have a slight change in schema, you're writing new ones. And then you end up having tens or hundreds of scripts. The version control becomes a problem, right? How do you scale this out? Enterprises and developers spend inordinate amount of time in writing one-off solutions to move the data. They might work for a few of their data assets, but they quickly become obsolete when things change. It's very, very unscalable, and it's unreliable because you would write a script or a service, and unless you put in a lot of time and effort, it's not going to work out in a long term. All these three things we heard over and over again from small, mid-size to large enterprises. The patterns are very common. So we said, you know what? Let's acknowledge the problem and let's do something about it. Let's help our community customers and partners to do that. For that, I'd like to share that for the assessment part, we've started working on our offering called Data Migration Assistant. It's available in limited release out there. We've had it online. I'm sure some of you might know about it. But it's an amazing tool. It gives you rich assessment, rich feature recommendation, and sizing. This tool is used exclusively for the planning purposes. It gives you deep insights, as you'll see tonight, into what are the compatibility issues, what are the migration blockers you'll come across when you're migrating to a target platform of your choice. It pinpoints and gives guidance. And the best part is it's scalable. It can scale to thousands of instances if need be. So this is the first part of assessment. The second part, which is the data movement, where we write one-off services or scripts to do that, I'm super excited to share with you guys the Azure Database Migration Service. This service is a fully managed Azure service that supports both Microsoft and non-Microsoft sources. It's built for scale, reliability, with enterprise security and privacy in mind. How about we jump into a hands-on demo to see how we can use both these offerings to make an actual migration happen tonight. Let me introduce Jeff Dalgas, who works with Stack Overflow, to share his journey about this migration.
So thank you very much, Nahil. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As Nahil said, my name is Jeff Dalgas, and I'm one of the very first developers for Stack Overflow. And so during my 9 years of developing Stack Overflow, I've been able to work on some really interesting challenges, starting with some of the very first lines of code for that power the Q&A platform, all the way to running a data center in Oregon that runs Stack Overflow about a mile away from my house. I've also been credited with, early on, with writing code that caused the very first Stack Overflow exception in Stack Overflow. I'll save the details for that for another talk on how to fail recursively. You get the idea. So being part of the journey of watching Stack Overflow go from an early idea to what it's become today has been an absolute adventure. I still love working on all aspects of Stack Overflow, even to this day, and with our team, and the community that powers Stack Overflow has never ceased to amaze me. And that is all of you. So even in this build conference, I'm sure there's some people that either helped someone or have been helped on Stack Overflow just today. If that's you, raise your hand. All right, I don't have that many stickers, but see me after the talk, and I'll dole them out to everyone who had their hands up. My current team mission right now is developing the Stack Overflow Enterprise Q&A platform. So to that goal, we have built the Stack Overflow Enterprise box. And we've taken everything you know and love about stackoverflow.com and packaged it in a way that allows it to run on-premise using physical machines, virtual machines, or in Azure. So why Azure? Well, we sell Stack Overflow as a fully managed cloud solution, which means we take care of deploying any fixes, upgrades, doing any of the troubleshooting, and it's a great platform for that. So having all of the Azure tools available has made that entire process of our software lifecycle much easier. We use the same code base for Stack Overflow Enterprise as we do for stackoverflow.com. So Stack Overflow Enterprise customers directly benefit from any change made to our devs that serve up pages to the millions of users who visit our site daily. This has been no small challenge. It's taken quite a bit of effort to shrink our deployment footprint, optimize our features, specifically for enterprise, and to get our databases migrated from a standalone SQL Server instance to Azure SQL DB. So a little background about the Stack Overflow Enterprise architecture. Our application is designed to be multi-tenant, and that engineering decision means that we host multiple Q&A sites that are all addressed using different base host addresses. So when you visit stackoverflow.com or superuser.com, or servervault.com, you're hitting servers running the same application pool, running the same code. So to support this multi-tenant architecture on the database side, we have a single database which stores what sites are configured, their state, and some aggregated data about all sites. And we've named that database Sites EE. The second database we deploy is the database for storing all of the user-generated Q&A content. And we've named this database Stack Overflow EE. And we require both databases in order for our application to run. So for this demo, we're going to focus on the tools we use to migrate our databases from standalone SQL Server to Azure SQL DB. And we're going to walk through the entire process of migrating these databases, running Stack Overflow Enterprise instance from on-premise standalone with 2 databases to Azure SQL DB. The first step we need to take when migrating the databases to Azure SQL DB is to assess if we have any significant blockers in our application around various SQL Server compatibility issues, or if we're using any features that may not be available in Azure SQL DB. We could spend hours, days, or even weeks doing what our favorite thing to do is, which is to go ask a bunch of questions on Stack Overflow and earn some reputation. Or we could use a tool built by Microsoft for such a purpose called the Data Migration Assessment Tool, or the DMA. So why the DMA? Because the team at Microsoft knows a whole lot about each version of SQL Server, all the platform compatibility requirements, and the feature sets for each version. And they packaged all of this knowledge into an easy-use assessment tool. So let's get to the demo. Enough talking. So to show that we are running on a standalone SQL instance, we'll launch Stack Overflow Enterprise. So you can see here that we have Stack Overflow Enterprise running, and we have a version that's showing the version number of the SQL Server version in the footer of the page. So we can right now see that we're running on an on-premise SQL Server 2016. So let's run the Data Migration Assistant against the Stack Overflow databases and see what it says. Pavel is going to demonstrate the power of the Data Migration Assistant.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. My name is Pavel Trnečka. I'm a developer on data migration team. I'm super excited to be here today, and I want to show you how to use Data Migration Assistant, or DMA, to identify all the compatibility issues with 2 Stack Overflow databases, how to fix those issues, and how to deploy updated schema into Azure SQL database. I'm running a private version of Data Migration Assistant tool on my machine, and we will begin by creating new assessment project. I'll call this project Move to Cloud. We will select our source server platform, which is going to be SQL Server, and we have several options for the target platform. For this migration, I'm going to select Azure SQL Database. Now, this page allows you to select several different options. The first one will allow me to find out all the compatibility issues on the database schema level. And the second option will identify all the feature gaps between on-prem version of SQL Server and Azure Database. I'm going to keep both these options selected, and we will go ahead and connect to my source server running Stack Overflow's databases. I'm going to select both databases here. And at this point, we are ready to go ahead and start the assessment. Now, behind the scene, we extract the schema for both databases to walk through all the objects in your database, tables, views, store procedure, everything that you might have in there. And we run a set of compatibility rules to identify all the compatibility issues. As you can see, we already have a report generated here. And there are 2 sections in the report. The first one, SQL Server feature parity, allow me to see all the feature gaps, all the features that are not supported on the SQL Azure database side. The other section right here, compatibility issues, will allow me to see all the compatibility issues on the database schema level. So let's first take a look on the feature parity report. As you can see right here, we have one unsupported feature detected for Stack Overflow database. This feature is cross-database references which are not supported in Azure SQL database. DMA will give me all the details. It will tell me what this feature, where this feature was, where the problem was detected, which is Stack Overflow EE database. It will give me a recommendation how to solve the problem. So it gives me two options. I can either move the dependent table over to my Stack Overflow database, or another option is I can use feature called elastic database query, which will allow me to achieve the same thing as the on-prem version of SQL Server. So right now we know that we have one feature which is not supported on Azure SQL database side. What about compatibility issues? Well, let's take a look. We have two databases here. As you can see, the first database doesn't really have any compatibility issue. However, for Stack Overflow EE database, we have 3 compatibility issues detected. As you can see here, we have 3 categories of issues. The first one, migration blockers, as the name suggests, are all the issues that will block your migration. If we don't fix these issues, we won't be able to deploy the schema into Azure SQL database. The second category, behavior changes, are issues which will have impact on functionality on your application, on functionality for your application. As an example, your application may have poor performance. And the last one, deprecated features, you can think about these issues. These are basically warnings. If you have a dependency on feature which is going to be removed in the next version of the product, your application will be broken. So what I really like about DMA is it gives me all the details about all these issues. It can pinpoint every single issue for me. It can give me full context about the problem, and it will also give me guidance on how to fix these issues. Let me show you. Cross-database queries. This is a migration blocker. And as you can see here, DMA tells me that cross-database references are not supported in Azure database. We already know that. But DMA also gives me the exact location where this issue was found. I know it was a function called network posts exists, and this function has a reference to another database, sites EE database, and that's the place where the problem is coming from. So now I know exactly where to go to fix this issue. Now the question is, how do I fix this issue? Well, DMA gives me a recommendation. I can either move the table over to my database, which is one option, or I can use a feature called elastic database query. Now, if you are not familiar with elastic database query, DMA will give you all the guidance on how to use this feature, and you can follow this link where you will find a lot of examples to address this issue step by step. Another one, issue under behavior changes category. DMA tells me that I'm using an old style syntax where I'm joining 2 tables using the where clause. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Actually, I'll do it this way. It's right here. I have 2 tables, and I'm joining them using the where clause. This is not recommended syntax for joins. So let's take a look where this issue is coming from. Well, DMA tells me it's v export badges view. It gives me exactly the line number where I need to go to address this issue. And the recommendation is to replace the old syntax with the new inner join, explicit join syntax. The last example is under deprecated features category. DMA tells me that one of my tables, sites events, has a column called message, which uses deprecated data type text. And the recommendation is to replace text with varchar or nvarchar. So now we know all the compatibility issues with Stack Overflow database, and I want to show you how to fix all these issues. Now, for migration to succeed, we don't really have to fix all compatibility issues. We just need to fix migration blockers. But it's definitely good practice to address these issues, to address all these issues in all three categories. For instance, if you don't fix unqualified joins issue, your application will likely have a poor performance. So it has definitely functionality impact on your application. If you don't fix issues under deprecated features category, you will very likely have to revisit your application later on when these features are removed. So I want to show you how to fix all these issues. To do that, we will go through these steps right here, post-assessment step, which will allow me to generate a deployment script, fix the issues in the script, and deploy the schema to Azure SQL database. I'm running a private version of DMA on my machine, which allows me to go through these steps, and this version will be publicly available by the end of this month. If you download DMA today, you will only see first 3 steps. Now, before we start, let me ask you, how many of you have already tried to migrate database, on-prem database, to Azure SQL database? Okay, maybe 10%. And please raise your hands if it was a straightforward experience. Okay, maybe one hand. So from my experience, if you do not have any compatibility issues in your database, it should be fairly straightforward. You can use tools like Management Studio, which allows you to generate the deck pack, and then you can deploy the deck pack to Azure SQL database. But what do you do when you have compatibility issues in your database? Deck pack generation would fail, and then the migration becomes more difficult. And that's exactly where DMA will help you out. So let me show you. We have 2 databases here. Sites EE, which has 0 compatibility issue, and Stack Overflow with 3 compatibility issues. I want to start with no issue database first, and then we will come back to this page, and I will show you the Stack Overflow database second. So let's review the schema of this database real quick. As you can see here, we have 1 SQL assembly in this database. We have 1 store procedure. We have roughly 50 tables and several user-defined functions. Now, this page allows you to select only a subset of these objects for migration. You can imagine that if you have too many compatibility issues in your database, it may become, you may want to address migration blockers first and come back and address all the other issues in the other categories later on, like do the data schema migration in several phases. And this is exactly what this page allows you to do. However, for my migration, I'll just keep all the objects selected, and we will go ahead and generate deployment script. Now, behind the scene, we use SMO scripting engine, which will generate all the create statement for us, and we work the dependency graph to figure out the right order of all the statements for the deployment script to succeed. As you can see, we already have our deployment script generated, and there are no issues here. So let's review this script real quick. One thing I would like to note here is we have every single statement inside if not exist check. This is very helpful in order to recover from possible failures. If the deployment script fails and we need to come back, fix some of these issues, and redeploy again, this check comes very handy to avoid the collision with the existing objects. So at this point, we don't have any work to do. There are no issues here. Let's go and deploy the schema. To do that, I need an empty Azure SQL database. I have already created one. So let me switch over to SSMS here, Management Studio. I want to double check that this database doesn't have any objects. As you can see here, we don't have any tables. And I can connect to my server here, provide credentials. Select my empty database, Azure database, and at this point, the deployment script is running. If it succeeds, we have successfully completed the schema migration for the first database. However, if it fails, DMA would allow me to go back, fix all the issues, and rerun the script again. And because we have if not exist checks for every single statement, it's safe to spend as many iterations as necessary to stabilize the schema and deploy the updated version. As you can see, the deployment is completed at this point. We have 0 issues here. Let me go back to Management Studio real quick and double check the schema. We should see some tables, yes. We are good. We have just completed first database. Now, I want to go back and show you how to deploy schema for the other database. This time it's going to be more interesting because we have 3 compatibility issues. So again, let's review the schema real quick. This time the schema is a little bit more complex. We have roughly 200 objects in this database. And as you can see here, DMA will highlight all the objects which has some compatibility issues associated. In this case, we are looking at table site events, and this table has one issue under deprecated features category. And again, DMA will give me all the details where this issue is coming from. This is the same information that I showed you in the assessment report. This is just provided in the context of each object so that you can make a better decision whether you want to exclude this object from the migration or not. Another example would be this user-defined function, network posts exists. As you can see, we have one migration blocker in this function. And the reason is because this function has a reference to table called network posts. And this table is coming from different database, Sites EE database, which is the first database that we have just migrated. If we don't fix the migration blocker, the deployment script would fail. So this is one of the issues we have to fix. And the last one is in the v export badges view, which is the unqualified join syntax that I showed you earlier. So for this migration, I'm going to keep all the objects selected, including those with compatibility issues, and I'll go ahead and generate a script. Now, once this script is generated, there will be a little bit of manual work to fix these compatibility issues. But DMA helps you a lot. DMA will give you, DMA will pinpoint every single issue for you. DMA will give you full context about the problem, and DMA will help you by guiding you through the solution, how to address these issues. Let me show you. We can just use these buttons right here to navigate to each issue and fix it. So our first issue is right here. And DMA gives me full context about the problem. So as you can see, this issue is in a table called site events. This is the deprecated data type text that we have already seen before. I know exactly where the problem is. It is in a column called message. So let me scroll down a little bit and find the problem. It's right here. Column message is defined as text, and text is deprecated. So how do we fix it? DMA provides recommendation to replace text with varchar max. That should be easy. Let me go back here and change text to varchar max. And we are done fixing the first issue. Now let's move on to the second one. Again, DMA gives me full context about the problem. This time it is in the network posts exists function, and it is a migration blocker because this function uses cross-database references. We know exactly where the problem is. Again, it's because we have a reference to another database. So let me find the problem right here. We have an inner join to network posts table, and this table is inside different database sites, EE database. This is not supported in Azure SQL database. So how do we fix this problem? Well, one option is to move the table over into our database. Another option would be to use feature called Elastic Database Query. Now, if you are not familiar with this feature, it will basically allow you to define something called external table. And this external table will redirect all the traffic to another database. In our case, it will be Sites EE database. If you need more details, we always have a link where you can go to get familiar with this feature and follow examples there. What I want to show you is I have a script written, very simple script. Basically, by following the article, we can create external table like so. The list of the columns for this table is going to be identical with the original table living in Sites EE database. And because it's external table, we need to define data source for this table. And data source is nothing but the name of the database. So in this case, I'll say the table is in Sites EE database. And I also need to define where this database is hosted, which is my Stack Overflow server 2, I believe, yes. And for security reason, we need to provide credential to authenticate, to have access to the other database. So the credential is defined right here. It's just database scoped credential with user and password. What I'm going to do is I'll copy this script over to DMA. And I'm going to keep the credential part commented out because I have already created a valid credential with valid password in my Azure database. I'm not going to execute this script. But I need my data source to be created as well as external table. So how does it help me to fix my problem here? Well, it's simple. Instead of having reference to external database, we will have a reference to external table. External table called network posts. The table is defined right here. And this table will redirect traffic to Sites EE database for me. So we are basically done fixing the second issue. And we can move on to the last one. This time, it's in the user-defined function network posts exists. Actually, this is the same one. I need to go here. Yeah, this is the last one. Unqualified joint detected in the view called vExport badges. This is how the old syntax typically looks like. You are joining two tables in the where clause, and the recommendation is to replace this syntax with the explicit join syntax. So let's see if we can find it down here. We have two tables, badges and user2 badges, and we are using where clause to join these tables. The fix is very simple. Just replace the where clause with inner join on these two columns, and we are done. At this point, we have fixed all the issues, and we can go ahead and deploy the schema. Let me double check again my pre-created database, Stack Overflow database. We do not have any tables here yet, so I'm going to use this database. Stack Overflow and deploy. As you can see, it's not that difficult to fix compatibility issues. I mean, it is a little bit of manual work, yes, but DMA will help you a lot. DMA will pinpoint every single issue for you. DMA will give you full context about the problem, and DMA will also help you to give you guidance on how to fix these issues. Also remember, assessment will give you all the compatibility issues that you need to know about. But it doesn't mean you have to fix them all. If you have too many compatibility issues, you can just focus on migration blockers first and come back and fix the other two categories later on. Now, once this schema migration script is deployed, we will be able to do data migration. And with that, I'm going to ask Nikhil to show you how to migrate data.
Thank you, Pavel. So this is the time where we talk about the new Azure Database Migration Service. The schemas are deployed. Now it's time to migrate the data, which is the phase 2 of our data migration journey. So let's see how that's happening. Azure Data Migration Service is a fully managed Azure service. You can create an instance of the service like you would create instance of any service in Azure portal. You can do new, and you can see that it is listed right here, Azure Data Migration Service. It's in limited preview. You can go ahead, create the service, give a name, use a subscription to use, and choose a network. This network must be connected to your on-prem network via Express Route or VPN, and then you can go ahead and create the service. For purposes of demo, I've already deployed the service. So let's just go back to the dashboard. I have a service deployed here. This is the landing page for the service. It gives you essential view, a resource group it's created in, what is the location it's created in, and the subscription, and any project that you would have done earlier. How about we go and do an actual migration? Let's create a migration project. Let's call it Stack Overflow. Now, this service selects SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL as a source. And it gives you an option of moving your database to Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, which was announced just earlier in the day, and Azure SQL Virtual Machine. So you have a choice depending on what platform you want to move to. What we've tried to do is we've given you a simple 5-step process of moving your entire database here. We wanted to abstract away all the complexity and just give you the bare minimal that is needed to do the job. So let's go ahead and select the target. Choose SQLauth. Get the creds. Encrypt the connection. And what the service is doing now is trying to connect to the SQL database in cloud and get the schema details loaded up so it knows what it's going to match up against. Let's connect to the source server. I have a source server, which is an on-prem SQL server that Stack Overflow is running against. Let's use SQL auth to connect. Do the creds, encrypt the connection. Same thing. Service is now connecting to on-prem, and it's trying to extract the databases that exist on the on-prem server. We have two databases, Stack Overflow and Stack Overflow EE. So let's try and migrate both these to Azure. So I'm going to map Stack Overflow to the schema that was deployed by Powell against Stack Overflow EE, and sites is the site EE schema. We save. What service will do now is it'll extract the objects on both the sites, both the schemas, and try to match up and give you an option of what schemas, what tables you want to migrate. The scenario here is you could try and consolidate tables if you wanted to on the target depending on your schema types. Here, we found that there are 144 objects, tables in Stack Overflow database, and 52. All of these are selected. It's mapped up. If there is a schema difference, the service will tell you by disabling and giving you a hint saying that, hey, these schemas don't match for the table. Let's save, and let service start creating a map of what it's going to do. Give you a summary. Here's the target Azure database we are going to move to from the source, which is running on SQL 2016. And that's it. I'm going to run migration. And it starts doing its job. Let's see what's going on here. Well, it's created the project, and it's moving, I think it's about 450 megs of the database. It's going to move. And it's already giving you updates. 15 of the 144 objects are already moved. It's going to give you details about each of these objects and the time, how long it took, and the rows all in real time. We've implemented a streaming pattern here, just so that for people who are interested in details of how we are doing this, not batch, so hopefully it will be lightning fast to move terabytes of data. It's, there you go. It's chugging along. While this is happening, I wanted to quickly touch base on what is going on under the cover. So for the migration aspect of the data, once you've done assessment and you want to migrate, the service would be your go-to thing. We've connected to an on-prem SQL server running Stack Overflow application. We have our Azure database connected up, and we have a VNet that is connected to our on-prem network using a VPN or an express route, just so that we can have eyes on the SQL server to resolve name and connect to it and whatnot. We went to Azure portal to create an instance of data migration service, pointed to the source and target, selected the schema, and we moved the databases. It is literally as simple as that. Let's check if the movement is done. And yeah, there we go. We have about 440 megs of databases all moved up. Jeff, what do you think?
That looks excellent. So at this point, it looks like everything's been moved. All that we need to do at this point is update our connection string, recycle the application pool, refresh our browser, and we should be able to verify that we are running on Azure.
Great, let me do that. I have just a script to do that. Change my connection string, reset the IIS app pool, and I think Stack Overflow app should be running
Excellent.
on Azure DB. How about let's just check this out here. I have the app running. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so you can
There
see
you go. We have migrated an on-prem app running on on-prem SQL Server 2016, which had some compatibility issues. We've shown how assessment and planning can help to guide you guys go make this journey of moving to Azure database. Let us Hey, Jeff, now that the app is running, what are we going to do about future-proofing, and how are you guys going to go make the cloud work for you?
Well, we are going to continue to use Azure, and are we going to talk specifically about the cognitive services?
Yeah.
So that's one aspect. We are looking at some of the Azure Cognitive Services specifically for grammar and spelling. We believe that using these facilities in the Azure portal will benefit all of our users because the content of the posts will definitely be of much higher quality.
Would you have been able to do this with less friction, less resources with an on-prem app?
It would have taken a lot more. We would have had to build infrastructure for that. So having it available in Azure as a service is just makes the whole process easy.
That's fantastic. So all you're saying is we've enabled your app to have business insight and have a competitive advantage by moving to Azure and have reduced the effort that you would have needed to achieve that.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I wanted to recap for the room again what we've done. I know we had a lot of things going on. We spoke about the two phases, assessment and migration. We wanted to introduce Data Migration Assistant, the tool that is going to help you do the planning. It's going to give you rich feature recommendation and reporting. This tool has assessed 250,000 databases till now. And some of those databases had over 1 million objects in them. All I'm trying to say is this tool is ready for you guys to use right now. You saw all UI right now, correct? It was easier for us to demo that way. If it's shown command line, it probably would be not that interesting. However, we have command line option for all of these. And our enterprise partners and customers in our beta program are using these command line options to automate their workflow of managing their database, the versioning and the upgrade process. The second part was the migration of data itself. We spoke about the scripts and writing one-off services which become quickly obsolete. We have Azure Data Migration Service that gives you both SQL, Oracle, MySQL as a data source to move all of it to Azure Data Platform. It's seamless, frictionless, and it's going to be working for most all the data types that you can come across. It is going to be blazing fast because we have a streaming pattern going, and it's going to move terabytes of data in a few hours instead of days, which is what it takes right now to move. Finally, I wanted to leave you guys with one thought. On-prem installs, we had to worry about backups and patching and monitoring, scale out, scale up, hardware, tunings, et cetera. With moving ourselves to Azure Database, we are going to not have to worry about any of this, but just focus on the app and make our business successful, get a competitive advantage, get a business insight that wasn't possible as shown by the Stack Overflow people. Finally, I wanted to wrap this up by pointing out a few interesting things. Data migration services in a limited preview. We have a sign up. Please go and sign up, and we'd be happy to onboard you guys, and you guys can start using the service. We have Data Migration Assistant already available for all you guys to use. It's an auto-updating app. So once you upload it, once you download it, you don't have to download it again. When we give you new iterative releases, it'll come and just update itself. So you'll get all the newness, all the goodness, new features, new fixes, all of that to make your life that much easier. Today, in the demo, we just showed migrating SQL Server to SQL Database using Azure Data Migration Service. But we have recorded session of how would you do the same thing with Oracle Database, which includes changing the schema, auto-updating the schema, fixing it up, converting it, deploying it to Azure Database, and moving the data, all of it. It's in the video, the P4182. Now, if you felt that Azure Database was not a choice of platform right now for you, and you wanted to, like for example, you have feature gaps that are blocking you, we just announced Azure SQL Database Managed Instance this morning that gives you a lift and shift capability and the goodness of cloud, best of both the worlds. And we have a talk on how you could use Azure Database Management Service to migrate your on-prem database to manage SQL DB instance. Finally, I wanted to thank all of you again for coming and hearing our story and looking at our tools. Hopefully, it will make it easier for you guys to do your jobs and make your business and customers and partners easy. Please give us feedback via eval. And that's the talk tonight. I can take questions from all you guys.